Hey guys, welcome to Mild Moments History. Tonight, you're not in your bed. You're on a merchant ship. The year is 1347. The sea air is sharp with salt, and the sails billow above you, full of the promise of return. You think this is a journey home, a return to riches with spices and silk filling the cargo hold. It is a return, yes, but you're not just carrying cargo. You're carrying something else. The rats in the cargo hold have gone quiet for a few days now. That's never a good sign. By the end of this journey, you'll understand how a single ship can carry not just silk, but the end of a world. What time is it where you are? I'd love to know where you're listening from. And if these stories help you rest a quiet like, lets me know you're here. Now dim the lights, let the sound of the waves, or maybe just the hum of a fan, carry you away. You feel the sway of the deck beneath your feet. The salt spray is on your face. You're almost home. But listen closely. Can you hear the silence spreading from below deck? That is the sound of history holding its breath, right before it screams. Your space is a damp corner below deck, where the air is thick with the smell of rotted wood, the sweat of dozens of men, and stagnant bilge water. You share this cramped space with other sailors, tired bodies pressed together on hard wooden planks. Your bed is simply a rough wool blanket, always feeling slightly damp, and a rolled-up canvas bag for a pillow. Every night you drift to sleep to the symphony of snores, coughs, and the groaning creak of the ship's timbers, as if the vessel itself is telling its own story of pain. The only light here filters through the cracks in the deck above, creating hazy shafts of dust that dance in the air. There are no windows and no privacy. Your life is bound to the rhythm of the ship. Its constant sway has become so ingrained in your blood that when you stand on solid ground, you feel unsteady. Everything is shared, the space, the air, and the fleas in the blankets. You're used to your shoulder rubbing against a stranger's in your sleep, used to waking up to an elbow in your back. This isn't a home. It is a wooden stomach slowly digesting you with each passing league of the sea. The stench is so familiar, you no longer notice it until a strong wind from the open ocean rushes in, carrying the clean scent of salt, and reminding you that another world exists outside this damp, musty hold. But then the wind passes, and you are back in your familiar reality with the darkness and the groaning wood. Each day begins and ends with the same sound, the cook's bell, a tired, clanging call to a meager meal. You don't eat for pleasure, you eat to survive. A typical meal is hardtack biscuits, as hard as stone made from flour, and water baked until all life has evaporated from them. To eat one, you must soak it in weak ale or water, waiting for it to reluctantly soften, then chew with the patience of a man gnawing on leather. Sometimes you find small black weevils in the biscuit. You simply flick them off. Protein is also a part of this survival. The main course is salted beef, dark red, tough, and shockingly salty, preserved in large wooden barrels. The taste of salt seeps into everything, and after weeks at sea, it has a flavor that is both familiar and wearying. You chew it mechanically, feeling the stringy fibers resist your teeth. It's more of a workout for your jaw than a meal. Water is stored in wooden casks, and after a few weeks, it tastes of rotten wood and has a thin layer of slime. That's why the ale is more common. It's thin sour and not nearly strong enough to make you drunk, but it's safe enough that you won't die of dysentery. The hunger never truly leaves. It has only quieted a dull ache in your stomach, a constant reminder that the next meal will be just the same. There are no fresh vegetables, no fruit, only the monotony of salt flour and survival. At sea, where the line between life and death is as thin as a rope, belief isn't a choice. It's an anchor. You and the other sailors live by unwritten rules. Superstitions whispered from one generation to the next. You never whistle on deck for fear of summoning a storm. You believe that seeing a great albatross following the ship is a bad omen, the soul of a drowned man offering a warning. Everyone carries their own private talismans, an old coin from home, a rope tied in a special knot, or a small shark's tooth hidden in a pouch. Saints are your silent companions. You whisper prayers to Saint Nicholas, the patron saint of sailors, whenever dark clouds gather on the horizon. When St. Elmo's fire dances on the mast during a storm, an eerie green light, you don't know whether to feel fear or protection. Is it a sign of salvation or a warning of the sea's wrath? You believe the stories of ghost ships, of mermaids who lure sailors to the depths, and of great monsters that lurk in the deepest waves. These stories aren't just for entertainment. They are reminders that the sea is a force both magnificent and terrifying, and that man is only a fragile guest on its surface. Your faith isn't written in books. It is written in the calluses on your hands, in the way you watch the waves, and in the silence you keep when a shipmate falls overboard and is lost to the sea forever. The journey is almost over. You can smell land in the wind, a scent of soil and wood smoke you had nearly forgotten. A sense of relief spreads through the ship. Laughter is heard more often, stories of home, of hot meals, of a bed that does not sway. But something is wrong. An unnatural quiet has begun to creep aboard, a silence you have never heard before. It started in the cargo hold. The rats. They were always there, their scratching and squeaking, a part of the ship's background noise. But now they are silent, utterly silent. A few of the older sailors have noticed, and they exchange worried glances when they think no one is watching. Then a member of the crew, a man named Pietro, begins to cough. It's not the usual sailor's hack from the sea air. It's a deep, dry, weak cough, as if he's trying to expel his own soul. A few days later, a fever takes him, a heat that makes his skin burn while his body shivers with cold. He is moved to a corner, covered with the thickest blanket. Whispers begin to spread faster than the wind. They speak of a strange sickness, a black fever they heard about in the eastern ports. No one dares to say its name aloud. The silence from the cargo hold now seems to have spread throughout the ship. The laughter has died. Men move more carefully, avoiding each other's touch, their eyes filled with suspicion. The storm they always feared is not coming from the sky. It is already on the ship, in every breath, in every bead of sweat, and it is waiting to make landfall. You first notice it during your night watch. The sky is cloudless, and the stars glitter like salt spilled across black velvet. The air is still broken only by the steady wash of the waves and the groan of the rigging. And then you hear it. It's Pietro's cough. It's not the usual sailor's hack, that wet, ragged sound born of sea spray and cheap ale. No, this is different. It's dry, deep, and strangely weak, as if coming from some exhausted place, deep inside his chest. He turns away, trying to smother it in his cloak, but the sound still escapes, a short, broken rattle, lost in the vast quiet of the ocean. You look at him. In the silver moonlight, Pietro's face is pale, and his eyes have a glassy, unfocused quality. He catches you looking, and tries to offer a smile, but it's strained and tired. It must be the sea air, he whispers, his voice hoarse, before turning back to stare into the darkness. You say nothing, but a coldness that has nothing to do with the night air begins to settle inside you. In the days that follow, the cough doesn't leave. It becomes part of the ship's soundscape, a dissonant note in the symphony of wind and waves. Pietro tries to work as usual, hauling ropes and swabbing the deck, but you see his breathing grow heavier. He moves slower, and when the coughing fits, he has to grip the rail, his whole body shuddering with the quiet effort. The others start to notice too. No one says a word, but an invisible space begins to form around Pietro. At meals, no one sits too close. When working, they choose a different rope to pull. It isn't cruelty, it is a primal fear, an instinctual reaction to something unfamiliar and unexplained. Pietro seems to notice it too. He grows quieter, his eyes more hollow, always looking down, as if he carries a guilt only he understands. On the fourth day, the fever starts. You see him huddled in a corner of the deck, a wool blanket wrapped tightly around him, despite the hot sun. His skin is burning when you accidentally brush against him, yet he shivers with cold. He refuses his meal, just shaking his head when the cook offers him a hard biscuit. Finally, the captain intervenes. He isn't a compassionate man, but he understands that fear is more dangerous than any storm. He orders the two strongest sailors to move Pietro to a separate storage area deep below deck. Just a precaution, the captain says, loudly, his voice firm. He needs to rest away from the wind. It's nothing. But everyone knows it's a lie. That night, lying on your wooden plank in the dark, stuffy quiet of the hold, you can hear his coughing echoing up through the timbers. A weak, dry, lonely sound. It is a new rhythm on the ship, a rhythm of waiting. And you don't know what you are waiting for. It begins, not with a sound, but with the absence of one. For weeks the rats had been your unwelcome companions, a constant scratching, skittering presence in the dark. You'd hear them in the walls while you tried to sleep, their tiny feet pattering across the wooden planks of the cargo hold. You'd see them in the flickering lamplight, dark shapes darting between barrels and sacks of grain. The crew complained about them endlessly, cursed them, set crude traps for them, and threw things at them whenever they got too bold. They were a nuisance, a pestilence, a filthy, thieving part of life at sea. And now they are gone. The realization doesn't come all at once. It's a slow, creeping dread. At first you think you're just tired, that the sound of the waves has finally drowned out their noise. But then another sailor mentions it in a hushed voice, his eyes wide. "Have you noticed?" he asks, not needing to specify what he means. You nod. Everyone has noticed. The nightly chorus of squeaks and scratches has fallen silent. The food scraps left near the galley are untouched. The grain sacks usually nibbled at the corners are whole. This silence is heavier than any storm. It feels wrong, unnatural. The rats who could survive on almost nothing, who thrived in the filth and darkness of the ship, have vanished. Where did they go? Did they flee? And, if so, what were they fleeing from? One afternoon, driven by a morbid curiosity, you can't explain, you venture down into the cargo hold alone. You hold a small oil lamp, its light casting long, dancing shadows. The air is stale and thick with the smell of spices, from the east cinnamon cloves, and something else, something sweet and cloying like overripe fruit. It's the smell of decay, but it's a quiet decay. You call out, your voice echoing strangely in the stillness. Nothing. You walk deeper into the hold, your footsteps loud against the wooden floor. You see the sacks of grain, the barrels of salted meat, the chests of silk. Everything is in its place, but the life that once teemed around it is gone. You remember seeing dozens of them here just a week ago, a writhing, shadowy carpet of them. Now there is only dust and silence. You find one, then another, lying still near a half-eaten piece of hardtack. Their bodies are not torn or eaten. They are simply stopped. Their small black eyes are dull, their fur matted. There are no signs of a struggle. They look as if they simply lay down to sleep and never woke up. A cold dread, sharp and real, runs through you. The rats were the first to know. They sensed the shift in the air, the change in the scent of the ship. They knew a predator was aboard, one they could not outrun. You back away slowly, your lamp flickering. The silence of the rats is more terrifying than their noise ever was. It's a warning, a prophecy, whispered from the lowest decks of the ship. It says that the sickness that has taken Pietro is not just a human ailment. It is something that has poisoned the very air, the very wood, the very soul of the vessel. You return to the upper deck, the sunlight, feeling harsh and alien after the gloom below. You don't tell anyone what you saw. You don't have to. The fear is already in their eyes. They know. The ship is no longer just a ship. It is a tomb in waiting, and the silence is spreading. Pietro does not get better. The corner of the ship where they've moved him becomes a place of fear, a small island of sickness that everyone gives a wide berth. The captain calls it a simple fever, a malady from a foreign port, something that will pass with rest and clean water. but you see the way the captain avoids looking at him, the way his jaw tightens whenever Pietro's weak cough echoes from below. This is not a simple fever. This is a siege. The heat coming from Pietro's body is unnatural. You can feel it from several feet away, a dry baking warmth that seems to suck the moisture from the air. His skin is flushed a deep, angry red, yet he shivers uncontrollably, his teeth chattering in a rhythm that matches the creaking of the ship. His blanket is soaked with sweat, a sour, sickly smell that clings to the air. You and a few other sailors take turns bringing him water. He barely drinks it. His lips are cracked, his eyes are glassy and lost, staring at something on the ceiling that isn't there. He begins to mutter. At first, it's just nonsense fragmented words in his native Genoese tongue. He speaks of home, of his wife, of a vineyard bathed in sunlight. But as the days wear on, the muttering turns to delirium. He cries out, convinced that shadows are moving in the corners of the room. He begs for forgiveness from saints whose names you've never heard. He sometimes mistakes you for his brother, grabbing your arm with a surprisingly strong grip, his eyes wild with a terror you can't understand. The ship's barber surgeon, a man more skilled with a razor than a poultice, declares it a simple imbalance of the humors. He suggests bleeding, but the captain refuses. No one wants to see the man's blood. They are already afraid of his breath. They try other remedies, the folk cures whispered from one sailor to another. Cool cloths soaked in seawater are placed on his forehead. They are hot and steaming within minutes. They force him to drink a bitter tea made of willow bark, but he just chokes on it. His cough is a constant rattling presence, a dry hacking sound that seems to tear at his lungs from the inside. And then the swellings appear. You see them first. Dark, purplish lumps in his neck and under his arm, hard and tender to the touch. They grow with horrifying speed, stretching the skin tight, their color deepening from purple to black. Now the whispers have a name. The Black Death, the Pestilence, the Great Mortality. The words are spoken in hushed, terrified tones. The sickness is not just in Pietro anymore. It is among them. A day later, another sailor, a young man from Venice named Marco, complains of a headache. By evening, he is shivering. The crew watches him, their faces a mixture of pity and terror. The captain can no longer deny it. The fever is not isolated. It is a fire, and it has just found new wood to burn. That night, you lie awake listening to Pietro's ragged breathing and Marco's new, dry cough. The unbroken fever is not just a sickness of the body, it is a sickness of hope, and it is spreading with the turning of the tide. The fear, once a quiet unease, has now curdled into something thick and poisonous. It lives in the spaces between men, in the long silences, and most of all in the whispers. Below deck, after the last watch is set, and the oil lamps are turned low, the ship comes alive with a new kind of sound. Not the hearty laughter or shared songs of the journey's beginning, but the hushed, frantic murmur of men trying to make sense of a nightmare. You see them huddled in corners, small groups of 3 or 4, their heads close together, their voices barely audible above the groaning of the ship. You can't always make out the words, but you can feel their weight. The whispers are a sickness of their own, spreading faster than the fever. One group argues it's a curse. They blame the strange idol they bought in Constantinople, a small, dark stone with unreadable carvings. An old sailor named Finian insists it has brought a demon aboard. He claims he saw a shadow with no body moving across the deck last night. No one believes him, but no one dismisses him either. In a world gone mad, even madness seems plausible. Another group has a different theory. It's the water. The casks taken on at the last port must have been fouled. They talk of a strange taste, a slight sliminess they noticed days ago, but said nothing of. Now every sip of water is taken with suspicion. Men hold it in their mouths, swishing it around, trying to taste the poison they are now certain is there. They watch each other drink, their eyes narrowed. Who drank the most? Who was the first to fall ill? Then there are the whispers about the cargo, the silks, the spices, the exotic furs from the east. They must be carrying the sickness. A sailor from Naples swears he saw strange insects crawling out of a bale of silk, small black creatures he'd never seen before. The story spreads like fire. Soon, the entire cargo hold is seen as a cursed place, a sealed tomb of pestilence. Men refuse to go down there, even for their duties. The captain threatens, but his authority is wearing thin. How can you command men who are more afraid of a bale of cloth than of your whip? You move through these pockets of paranoia, a ghost in your own ship. You hear your name whispered once or twice. You were the one who tended to Pietro first. Did you touch him? Did you breathe the same air? The suspicion is a physical thing, a wall that rises between you and the men you once called brothers. You start to feel the isolation. The same invisible space that grew around Pietro is now forming around you. The whispers twist and turn, weaving a tapestry of fear and blame. It's not just the sickness they fear anymore. It's each other. The ship is no longer a crew. It is a collection of frightened men, trapped on a floating piece of wood, surrounded by an endless ocean, with a plague on board and poison in their words. The whispers finally grow loud enough to reach the captain's quarters, or perhaps the fear becomes too palpable to ignore. One morning after the meager breakfast has been served, he gathers what's left of the crew on the main deck. Captain Alessio is a man carved from sea salt and stubbornness, with a thick beard that hides his mouth, but not the permanent scowl etched around it. He has sailed these routes for 20 years, and he has seen his share of storms, pirates, and shipboard fevers. He stands on the quarterdeck, his boots planted firmly, his hands behind his back, trying to project an aura of unshakable control. There will be no more talk of curses. He begins his voice a low growl that cuts through the morning air, and no more whispers of plague. He lets the word hang there for a moment, tasting it, then spitting it out, as if it were poison. Pietro has a ship's fever, nothing more. It happens on long voyages. The water goes bad, the air gets stale. Marco is weak from the heat. We are sailors. We are not old women to be frightened by shadows. He scans the faces of the crew, his gaze lingering on the men he knows are the most superstitious. You watch him closely. His voice is steady, his posture rigid, but you see it. A slight tremor in his hand as he grips the railing. A flicker of something that looks like fear in his eyes before he hardens them again. He is performing. He is acting the part of the captain, the man in charge, because he knows it's the only thing holding the ship together. The denial is not for you, it is for him. He is trying to convince himself as much as the crew. You will return to your duties, he commands. The sails need mending, the deck needs swabbing. Any man found whispering, spreading fear, or shirking his work will be flogged. Is that understood? A low murmur of "Yes, Captain" ripples through the men, but it is a resentful, hollow sound. The camaraderie of the first few weeks is completely gone, replaced by a sullen obedience. The men disperse, but not before exchanging quick, knowing glances. The captain's denial hasn't quelled the fear. It has only buried it deeper. It has made the fear a forbidden thing, something that now festers in the dark, in the quiet corners of the ship. You watch him stand there for a moment, longer, staring out at the empty horizon. He is a man standing on a crack in the ice, pretending the cracking sound is merely the wind. He is not in control of this ship anymore. The fever is. The silence is. And his words, meant to be an anchor, now feel like a dead weight, pulling you all down faster. You know, and everyone on board knows that this isn't a ship's fever. It is something else, something ancient and hungry, and the captain's refusal to name it only gives it more power. Pietro dies in the suffocating heat of the afternoon. There is no final cry, no dramatic last words. His ragged coughing simply stops. The news spreads through the ship not as an announcement, but as a change in the atmosphere. The silence from the small storage room below deck becomes absolute, a heavy, final quiet that is more terrifying than any sound. The captain sends for you and another sailor, an old, weary man named Henrik. His orders are brief, his voice strained. Get him ready for the sea, and be quick about it. You and Henrik descend into the lower decks, into the gloom and the stench. The air in the small compartment is thick and foul, a smell of sickness and sweat, and something else you don't want to name. Pietro lies on his damp blanket, his body still. His eyes are half open, staring at the low ceiling. The dark swellings on his neck and under his arms are now the size of small apples, black and glistening in the dim lamplight. His skin is a patchwork of angry red and pale gray. This is the first time you have seen the sickness in its final form. This is what it does. This is how it ends. Neither of you speaks. You work quickly, your movements stiff with fear. You wrap Pietro's body in a spare piece of canvas, sail the rough fabric scratching against your hands. You avoid touching his skin, using the cloth as a barrier, as if the sickness could leap from his cold body into yours. Henrik finds a heavy rusted piece of a broken anchor chain to use as a weight. You bind it to the body with thick rope, your knots clumsy and tight. The whole time you try not to breathe too deeply. You try not to think about the fact that just a few weeks ago you shared a cup of ale with this man, listened to his stories about his children in Genoa. Now he is just a weighted parcel, an object to be disposed of. You carry him up to the main deck. The other sailors watch from a distance, their faces pale and grim. They have stopped working. The entire ship is still waiting. The captain stands by the rail, a small worn book in his hand. He recites a prayer, his Latin mechanical and rushed. The words feel empty, meaningless against the vast, indifferent blue of the sea. When he is finished, he nods. You and Henrik push the canvas-wrapped body over the side. It hits the water with a heavy final splash and disappears, instantly pulled down into the depths. There is no marker, no tombstone, just a brief swirl of water that is quickly smoothed over by the waves. The first death is now a fact. It is no longer a fever. It is no longer a rumor. It is real. The silence that follows is profound. The crew stands frozen, looking at the spot where the body vanished. Then slowly, they look at each other. The question is in everyone's eyes, unspoken but screaming. Who is next? The sickness now has a face, a physical form that haunts everyone's waking moments, the swellings, the buboes. Marco, the young Venetian, who fell ill after Pietro, now has them. 2 dark, angry lumps have appeared in his groin, and he cries out in pain whenever he moves. The fear on the ship is no longer an abstract dread of fever or death. It has become a specific terror of these black swollen nodes. They are the mark, the undeniable sign that you are claimed. Men start checking themselves in secret. You see them in the quiet moments in the shadows of the sails, their hands slipping under their arms, across their necks, down to their groins, feeling for the telltale lump. Every small ache, every tender spot sends a jolt of pure panic through them. A man will suddenly freeze his face, going pale, his hand pressed against his side, and you can see the desperate prayer in his eyes that it is just a muscle cramp, a simple strain, anything but the mark. The atmosphere becomes one of hypervigilance. You find yourself doing it too subconsciously, your fingers brushing against your neck, as if by accident. You feel a small knot in your shoulder from hauling ropes, and for a heart-stopping second, you think it's me. The relief that follows when you realize it's nothing is so intense it leaves you weak and trembling. The barber surgeon, desperate to do something, anything, decides that the swellings must be lanced. He believes they are just boils full of bad humors that need to be released. He approaches Marco with a small, sharp knife, his face set with a grim determination. A few sailors hold Marco down. He is too weak to fight, but he sobs, begging them not to. The surgeon makes a quick incision. What comes out is not simple pus. It is a thin, foul-smelling dark liquid mixed with blood. Marco screams a sound so full of agony that several sailors turn away their hands over their ears. The treatment does nothing. The wound becomes infected, and the swelling grows larger, angrier. The surgeon does not try again. He now knows, as everyone does, that these are not boils. They are a feature of the disease, a part of its horrifying progression. The buboes become the focus of all the ship's fear. They are talked about in hushed, terrified tones. Men describe them in detail, their size, their color, their hardness. A sailor from Pisa swears he saw one on a dockworker in Caffa that was the size of an orange. The stories become more and more grotesque, a way of trying to understand the horror by exaggerating it. One night, you are woken by a muffled cry. A sailor, a man you barely know, has found a swelling on his own body. In a fit of terror and despair, he has tried to cut it out himself with his own rigging knife. He now lies bleeding in his bunk, a new wound on top of the old sickness, his face a mask of pain and regret. You help the others bind his wound, but everyone knows it is pointless. He is already marked. Lying in your bunk, you feel a dull ache under your own arm. It's probably from pulling the ropes, you tell yourself. It has to be. But you can't stop your hand from creeping up to feel the spot gently, then more firmly. Your heart pounds in your chest, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Is it just a sore muscle, or is it the beginning? In the darkness, you can't be sure. And that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. The captain's denial has shattered. In its place is a raw, desperate faith. With the sickness now claiming a third man, a young sailor from Greece, who has fallen into a feverish sleep, Captain Alessio seems to realize that discipline and denial are useless against a force he cannot see. And so he turns to the one authority he has left to appeal to God. He orders the entire remaining crew to the main deck. It is a strange assembly. The healthy stand apart from the sick, their faces gaunt, their eyes shadowed with a fear that has now settled deep into their bones. The sun is high and hot, beating down on the wooden planks, but a chill runs through the gathering. The captain is not a priest, and he holds his small leather-bound prayer book awkwardly, his thick fingers tracing the lines of Latin text he barely understands. He begins to read. His voice, usually a booming command, is now thin and strained. It's a prayer for deliverance, a plea to God, and to St. Christopher, the protector of travelers, to spare them from the pestilence that has boarded their ship. He asks for mercy, for a sign, for an end to the suffering. The crew stands with their heads bowed, their lips moving silently, each man lost in his own private conversation with the heavens. You watch them. You see Finian, the old Irish sailor, clutching a small wooden cross, so tightly his knuckles are white. You see a young deckhand from France weeping silently, tears tracking clean paths through the grime on his face. For a moment, there is a flicker of hope, a shared belief that perhaps, if their prayers are fervent enough, if their repentance is sincere, they might be spared. They are at the mercy of the sea and the sky, and for this brief moment, they are united in their appeal. The captain's voice falters as he reads the final lines. He closes the book with a quiet snap. The prayer is finished. The men raise their heads, looking around as if expecting a miracle, a sudden cleansing wind, a break in the clouds, a feeling of peace. Instead, they get a gasp. One of the sailors standing near the mast, a man who had seemed perfectly healthy just moments before, stumbles forward. He clutches his stomach, his face suddenly pale, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He groans a low, guttural sound and collapses to the deck. The men around him scramble back their prayers, forgotten, replaced instantly by the raw animal instinct of fear. The sickness has answered them. It has mocked their faith by striking another victim at the very moment they begged for salvation. The captain stares at the fallen man, the prayer book slipping from his fingers. The hope that had flickered just moments ago is extinguished, leaving behind nothing but cold, bitter ash. You look up at the vast, empty sky, and for the first time on this voyage, you feel utterly and completely alone. God is not listening, or, if he is, he does not care. You are on your own, trapped on a dying ship with no one to save you. The sickness has a new ally now, fear. It spreads faster than the fever, a contagion of the mind that is just as deadly. The social fabric of the crew, already frayed, now tears apart completely. There are no more shared meals in the galley. There are no more conversations on the deck during the quiet hours of the night watch. The ship has become a collection of isolated, terrified souls, each man a prisoner in his own circle of dread. You see it in the way they move. They walk with their arms crossed, their hands tucked away as if to protect themselves from an invisible threat. They avoid each other's gaze. Eye contact has become too intimate, too dangerous. To look at someone is to acknowledge their existence, and to acknowledge their existence is to acknowledge the possibility of their death and your own. A cough from across the deck makes you flinch. A man stumbles and no one moves to help him up. Pity has been replaced by self-preservation. A gnawing paranoia takes hold of the ship. Men watch each other constantly, their eyes darting, searching for the first signs. A flush on the cheek, a slight tremor in the hand, a moment of weakness or fatigue. Everyone is a potential carrier, a vessel for the pestilence. The black swellings, the buboes, are now the object of a collective obsession. You see men secretly checking their own bodies, their hands slipping into their clothes to feel their necks, their armpits, their groins. The act is quick, furtive, almost shameful. You are no different. You have become hyper-aware of your own body, a landscape of potential betrayal. Every slight ache, every itch, every wave of fatigue sends a spike of cold terror through your heart. You wake in the night, your heart pounding, convinced you feel a new tenderness under your arm, and you lie there in the darkness, your hand pressed to your skin, counting your own heartbeats, waiting. The fear is a physical thing, a tightening in your chest, a sour taste in your mouth. It robs you of sleep. It steals your appetite. You chew your hardtack without tasting it, your mind, elsewhere, calculating odds, remembering the faces of the dead. The silence on the ship is the worst part. The lively chatter of the voyage is a distant memory. Now the only sounds are the essential ones, the creaking of the ship, the sigh of the wind in the sails, the wash of the waves, and the low, muffled moans of the sick. The fear has driven everyone inward into the prison of their own minds. You are surrounded by men, yet you have never felt so alone. You realize with a chilling certainty that the plague has two ways of killing you. One is fast with fever and swellings. The other is slow with a creeping dread that erodes your sanity, isolates your spirit, and leaves you to face the end in a solitary hell of your own making. Marco, the young Venetian, dies just before dawn. His passing is as quiet as Pietro's. The fever simply consumes him, and his ragged breathing fades into the great silence of the sea. This time, there is no shock. There is no collective gasp of horror from the crew. There is only a grim, weary acceptance. Death is no longer a visitor. It is a resident. The captain summons you and Henrik again. His face is a mask of exhaustion. The pretense of control is gone. His orders are no longer loud commands. They are tired, hollow words. You know what to do. And you do. The ritual has become familiar. You descend into the dark, foul-smelling hold. You find Marco's body, his youthful face, now gaunt and gray in the lamplight. You see the black swellings, the marks of the disease, and you feel nothing but a dull, empty ache. The terror has been replaced by a cold efficiency. You and Henrik work in silence, your movements practiced, almost choreographed. You unroll the spare canvas. You lift the body, careful not to let your bare skin touch his. You wrap him tightly. You find the same rusted piece of anchor chain and bind it to the body. The knots are tied with a speed and precision born of grim repetition. You carry him up to the deck. This time only a few sailors gather to watch. Others remain below, not wanting to see, not wanting to be reminded. The captain does not bring his prayer book. He simply stands at the rail, his head bowed, and mutters a few words you cannot hear. It is less a prayer and more a tired farewell. You and Henrik push the body overboard. The splash is the same heavy final, but this time it feels different. It is not a punctuation mark of horror. It is just another beat in a monotonous rhythm of death. The ship moves on without pause. As soon as the body is gone, the sailors who were watching disperse. There are no shared looks of grief, no quiet words of comfort. Each man returns to his own solitary world of fear. The burial is over in minutes. It has become a routine, a grim chore to be completed as quickly as possible. You stand at the rail for a moment, watching the wake of the ship, the endless blue of the water. You realize with a sinking heart that this is your job now. You are no longer just a sailor. You are an undertaker on a ship of the dead, and you know with a certainty that chills you to the bone that there will be more bodies to bury. The fear that has been simmering below deck finally boils over. It doesn't happen with a roar, but with a desperate, pathetic whimper. A small group of sailors, their faces gaunt and their eyes wild with terror, corner the captain near the helm. They are led by a man named Gaspard, a wiry sailor from Marseille, whose hands tremble as he grips a small rigging knife. They are not strong. They are not organized. They are simply men who have run out of hope and have decided that any action, no matter how foolish, is better than waiting to die. "We have to turn back," Gaspard says, his voice cracking. "We can't go to Messina. The sickness comes from the east. We must sail west back the way we came." The other men murmur in agreement, a low, desperate chorus. They talk of returning to an empty sea, of finding an uninhabited island, of outrunning the pestilence by sailing against the wind. It's madness. They have barely enough water to reach their destination, let alone sail back across the vast, empty Mediterranean. They are not thinking with logic. They are thinking with fear. The captain, for his part, looks exhausted, but resolute. The denial has been stripped from him, leaving behind a hard, brittle core of authority. He doesn't draw his sword. He doesn't shout. He simply stands there, his hands gripping the ship's wheel, as if it were the only thing holding him upright. "There is no turning back," he says, his voice low and steady. "Our only hope is to make port, to find help." "There is no help in Port," Gaspar shouts. "Only more death. You are leading us to a slaughter." He takes a step forward, the knife unsteady in his hand. A few other sailors draw their own blades, their movements clumsy and uncertain. This is not a mutiny born of strength. It is a mutiny born of despair. For a moment, the ship hangs in a tense silence. The few sailors still loyal to the captain, or at least loyal to the idea of order, move to his side. It looks as though the ship will finally turn on itself, that the violence they have all feared will now erupt among them. But then something shifts. Gaspard, the leader of the mutineers, suddenly stumbles. A look of confusion crosses his face. He drops the knife with a clatter. His hand flies to his neck, feeling for something. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated horror. He has found it. The swelling. The mark. He collapses to the deck, not from a blow, but from the sudden crushing weight of his own fate. The other mutineers freeze their knives, forgotten. The rebellion dissolves in an instant, its leader struck down, not by the captain's sword, but by the sickness itself. The irony is so cruel, so absolute, that no one even speaks. They simply carry Gaspar below deck, his fever already beginning to rise. You stand there watching it all unfold, and a profound sense of hopelessness washes over you. Even rebellion is futile here. The sickness is the only captain now. It sets the course. It decides who lives and who dies, and there is no escaping its command. On board is a man who is supposed to offer comfort, a man whose job it is to mend and to heal. His name is Elio, the ship's barber surgeon. He is an old man with gentle hands that are more skilled at trimming a beard than setting a bone. In his small corner of the ship, he has a wooden chest filled with his tools, a few sharp razors, a small bone saw for amputations he has never had the courage to perform, and a collection of dusty jars filled with dried herbs powders, and what he claims is powdered unicorn horn, though you suspect it is just ground-up fish bones. In the early days of the sickness, Elio was a figure of authority. He consulted his one medical text, a worn, water-stained scroll based on the teachings of the ancient Greeks. He spoke of humors and miasmas of bad air and the need for balance. He was the one who tried to lance Marco's, swelling an act of blind confidence that ended in screams and failure. Now he is a broken man. The sickness has defied all his knowledge. His herbs do nothing. His prayers feel empty. His book offers no answers for a pestilence that moves with such speed and horror. You find him one evening sitting alone, staring at his hands as if they were strangers. He looks up at you, his eyes filled with a profound and weary sadness. "I can do nothing," he whispers, his voice frail. "I'm a barber. I can give a man a clean shave. I can pull a rotten tooth. But this is not an illness. This is a judgment from God, and I am no priest." He tells you that everything he was ever taught feels like a lie. He has spent his life believing in the power of herbs, in the precise art of bloodletting, in the logic of the four humors. But this sickness laughs at his knowledge. He shows you his hands, trembling slightly. "These hands are meant to heal," he says. "But now I am afraid to touch anyone. I am afraid I carry the sickness on my very skin." He has stopped seeing the sick. He no longer offers poultices or comfort. He has quarantined himself, not because he has the fever, but because he has been defeated by his own helplessness. He now spends his days reading his one book over and over, as if the answer might suddenly appear in the faded ink. His surrender is in its own way more terrifying than the captain's denial. The captain tried to fight the fear with authority. Elio, the man of knowledge, has simply given up. His retreat into silence tells the crew what they already suspect: there is no cure. There is no science or medicine that can save them. They are left with only what they had in the beginning: their superstitions, their talismans, and the vast empty sea. The ship's healer has pronounced them all incurable, not with his words, but with his silence. With the captain's authority hollowed out, and the ship's healer lost in despair, the men turn to their last and most ancient comfort: superstition. The ship becomes a floating shrine of desperate personal rituals. The air grows thick with whispered prayers and the clinking of small hidden charms. Every sailor has won a small piece of the world they left behind, now imbued with all their hope for survival. You see men rubbing worn coins until the images have faded, whispering to them as if they were holy relics. Others trace the patterns on small carved wooden animals. Finian, the old Irishman, has a small pouch of what he claims is soil from his home, which he smells every morning. The belief is that these objects, these pieces of home, hold a protective magic and anchor to a life that feels 1,000,000 miles away. You have one too. A small, smooth gray stone you picked up from the beach in your village the day before you sailed. You've held it in your pocket for the entire voyage. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you take it out, its cold, smooth surface, a familiar comfort in your palm. It used to make you feel safe, connected. Now you're not so sure. The true test of these beliefs comes with a sailor named David, a quiet, pious man from Wales. He is the most devout man on the ship. He never misses a prayer. His bunk is adorned with a small hand-carved cross, and around his neck he wears a leather pouch containing, he claims, a splinter from a saint's bone. He is a man shielded by faith. Everyone believes that if anyone is to be spared, it will be David. Then one morning he doesn't rise for his watch. When you go to check on him, he is burning with fever, and by evening the black swellings have appeared on his neck. The crew is stunned. It's a devastating blow to the ship's fragile morale. If David, with all his prayers and holy relics, can be taken, then what hope is there for anyone else? His sickness is proof that the talismans are powerless. The prayers are unheard. The saints are not listening. That night, something shifts in the quiet desperation of the crew. You hear a small splash, then another. Peeking out onto the moonlit deck, you see a sailor standing at the rail, his back to you. He opens his hand and lets a small object drop into the dark water. His lucky coin. A moment later, another man does the same, tossing his knotted rope charm into the sea. The objects that once held so much hope are now just dead weight reminders of a faith that has failed them. You retreat to your bunk, your hand closing around the small cold stone in your pocket. It no longer feels like a connection to home. It feels like a simple rock, meaningless and cold. The last anchor has been cut. You are adrift not just on the ocean, but in a world without magic, without protection, without hope. And the sickness is still spreading. The cook is the next to fall ill. He was a large, grumpy man from Sicily, who communicated mostly through banging his ladle and cursing at the quality of the salted beef. Yet his presence was a constant rhythm that structured your days. His bell signaled the morning meal, the midday break, and the final supper before the night watch. It was the one sound on the ship that meant something other than work or weather. It meant sustenance. It meant a moment of pause. Now that bell is silent. For 2 days after he takes to his bunk, his body racked with fever, no one takes his place. The galley, once the smoky, chaotic heart of the ship, is deserted. The fire is out. The great stew pot, which had been simmering for weeks, now sits cold and empty. And the bell hanging from its hook does not ring. The silence it leaves is more jarring than any storm. There are no scheduled meals. The formal distribution of rations is gone. The simple act that brought the crew together twice a day has vanished. A quiet, desperate chaos takes over. The men are left to fend for themselves. You see them sneaking into the storeroom, grabbing handfuls of hardtack, stuffing them into their shirts. They gnaw on the dry, hard biscuits, in secret hiding in the shadows, their eyes darting around like cornered animals. The small barrel of ale is now a source of conflict. Men jostle for a cup, their movements clumsy and aggressive. Arguments break out over a single spilled drop. You feel a new kind of hunger now, one that is mixed with the anxiety of uncertainty. Before you knew when you would eat. Now you eat only when you are desperate enough to risk a confrontation in the storeroom. Time itself feels broken. Without the cook's bell to mark the passage of the day, the hours blur into a long, monotonous stretch of sun and sea and fear. The sun rises and sets, but the familiar rhythm of life is gone. You realize how much you relied on that simple sound. It was more than a call to a meal. It was a promise that despite the hardship, there was still order. There was still a system. There was still a crew. Now, there is only a collection of hungry, frightened men on a ship that has lost its heartbeat. The silence of the cook's bell is the silence of a world coming undone. It is the sound of the last thread of normalcy snapping. And in its absence, the only rhythm left is the slow, steady beat of the sickness counting down the hours. The sickness accelerates. It moves through the crew like a phantom fire, leaping from one man to the next. The isolated corner for the sick is no longer sufficient. One by one, men stumble below deck, their bodies burning with fever, and they do not come back up. The main sleeping area, the crowded space where you all once shared stories and snores, is no longer a place for the living. It has become the infirmary. It has become the morgue. The healthy sailors, a dwindling few, stop sleeping there. You and the others now sleep on the open deck, exposed to the cold night air and the sea spray. You would rather face the elements than the horror below. The smell that wafts up from the hatch is unbearable, a thick, sweet, cloying stench of sweat sickness and death. It is a smell that sticks to the back of your throat, a taste you can never get rid of. One day, the captain orders you to fetch a spare coil of rope from below. You hesitate at the top of the ladder, your heart pounding. You take a deep breath of the clean sea air, as if you can store it in your lungs, and then you descend into the twilight gloom. The scene below is something from a fever dream. Men lie on the floor on the wooden bunks, wherever they collapsed. Some are moaning softly, their bodies contorted in pain. Others lie perfectly still, their faces slack, their eyes staring into nothing. It is hard to tell the living from the dead. The air is heavy and hot, and the only sound is a low, continuous chorus of groans and ragged breathing. You see men you once knew, strong sailors with powerful arms and loud laughs, now reduced to skeletal figures, their skin pale and stretched tight over their bones. You find the coil of rope, your movements quick and clumsy. You try not to look, but you can't help it. Your eyes are drawn to the still forms, the open mouths, the dark swollen buboes that mark them. You see a man reach out a trembling hand, his lips moving, but no sound comes out. You want to help, to offer water, to say something, but the fear paralyzes you. You are an intruder in the land of the dying. You scramble back up the ladder, bursting onto the deck, gasping for fresh air, your lungs burning. The image of what you saw is seared into your mind. The ship is no longer a vessel carrying silk and spices. Its true cargo is death. It is a floating coffin, its holds filled with the bodies of the dead and the dying. And you, the few who can still walk, are its unwilling pallbearers, sailing toward a port that knows nothing of the horror you are bringing to its shores. With the cook gone and half the crew dead or dying, a new cold reality sets in. The sickness may not claim everyone. Starvation might get there first. A small group of you, the handful of men who are still healthy enough to think clearly, gather on the deck. Among you is the captain. His face, now a gray mask of despair, and Henrik, the old sailor, his eyes steady and pragmatic. It is Henrik who speaks first, his voice raspy but firm. We must count the living, and we must count the food. It is a grim task. You go through the ship counting the souls who can still stand, who can still speak. The number is shockingly small. Less than a third of the crew remains. Then you take inventory of the remaining supplies. You open the barrels of hardtack, counting the biscuits. You check the casks of water and ale, measuring their levels with a knotted rope. You survey the remaining salted beef. It is a pathetic hoard, meant for a full crew, but now it must last for an unknown number of days for the few survivors. A new order is established, a desperate calculated system for survival. The food and water are moved and put under the captain's direct guard. Each day at sunrise and sunset, every surviving man receives his ration, one hardtack biscuit and a single cup of watered-down ale. That is all. It is a carefully measured portion of starvation designed to keep you alive, but nothing more. The first distribution is a tense, silent affair. The men line up, their eyes fixed on the small pile of biscuits. You watch as each man receives his share, his hand closing around the single dry biscuit as if it were a piece of gold. There are no words, only suspicious glances. Men watch each other to make sure no one gets an extra crumb. The trust that once bound the crew is completely gone, replaced by the raw animal instinct of hunger. You take your ration and retreat to a quiet corner of the ship. You eat slowly, breaking the biscuit into tiny pieces, letting each one dissolve on your tongue, trying to make the sensation last. The stale, floury taste is the most beautiful thing you have ever experienced. But it is gone in moments, leaving you with the same gnawing emptiness in your stomach, only now it is sharpened by the knowledge of how little is left. This new routine brings a strange kind of order back to the chaos. It is the logic of survival at its most brutal and basic. But as you look out at the endless sea, a new fear takes root. Even if you are one of the lucky ones, even if the plague does not take you, you might still die. Not from the fever, but from the slow, quiet, agonizing death of starvation, with the smell of land just out of reach. With the ship now a silent floating tomb, your only escape is sleep. But sleep is no longer a mercy. It has become its own special kind of torture. For in sleep, you dream of home. And the dreams are not fragmented or hazy. They are vivid, cruel, and painfully real. You are no longer on the rolling sea, but on solid ground, the familiar dirt of your village path, firm beneath your bare feet. You can feel the warmth of the sun on your face, a gentle, life-giving warmth, not the harsh, baking heat of the open ocean. You dream of your mother's kitchen, the air thick with the smell of baking bread, a scent so real you can almost taste it. You see her standing by the hearth, her hands dusted with flour, and she turns and smiles at you, a smile you haven't seen in what feels like a lifetime. In another dream, you are in the local tavern, the air filled with laughter and the sound of a familiar folk song being played on a fiddle. A friend claps you on the back, and the ale in your cup is cold and fresh, not the sour, lukewarm liquid you drink to stay alive. You feel the simple, uncomplicated joy of companionship, a feeling that now seems like a distant myth. You dream of the face of your wife, or the girl you left behind, her features so clear you could reach out and touch her. You hear her voice, not a memory, but a living sound, and in the dream, you believe with all your heart that you are finally home, that the voyage is over, that the nightmare is behind you. These dreams are a sanctuary, a brief return to a world where life is not defined by fear and death. But the cruelty is in the waking. You are jolted from this paradise, not by a gentle touch, but by the cold, damp air of the deck, the groaning of the ship, and the ever-present stench of sickness. You open your eyes, and the beautiful dream dissolves like mist, leaving behind an ache so profound it feels like a physical wound. The memory of the warm bread makes the stale hardtack in your gut feel even more like a stone. The memory of laughter makes the silence on the ship feel even more oppressive. The memory of a loved one's face is a sharp stabbing pain, a reminder of everything you have lost and will never see again. You begin to fear sleep. You try to stay awake, taking extra watches, staring into the darkness of the sea until your eyes burn. You know that to sleep is to dream, and to dream is to visit a paradise you can no longer have. The pain of waking up, of being ripped from that world of warmth and love, back into this cold, floating hell is almost more than you can bear. The dreams are no longer an escape. They are a reminder that the man you were is already dead. One night, the oppressive silence is broken. It's not the sound of a man coughing or groaning in his fever. It's something else entirely. A song. The voice is weak, thin, and wavering, but it cuts through the darkness with a strange clarity. It's Finian, the old Irish sailor, the one who carries the pouch of soil from his home. He is sitting on the deck, his back against the mast, his eyes closed, and he is singing an old Gaelic lament. You don't understand the words, but you understand the feeling. The melody is slow and heartbreaking, a song of loss, of exile, of a love left on a distant shore. It is a song that seems to hold all the sorrow of the world in its simple, repetitive notes. At first, the other sailors are still listening. The sound is so unexpected, so human, that it seems to momentarily stop the fear. It's a sound from the world they used to know, a world of music and memory. Then, another voice joins in, softly, tentatively. It's a sailor from Brittany, his voice harmonizing with Finian's in a different tongue, but with the same deep sadness. Then another, and another. Soon a handful of men are singing, their voices blending in the darkness. It is not a powerful chorus. It is a broken, fragile sound, full of grief and exhaustion. But it is a sound they are making together. For a few brief, sacred minutes, they are not just isolated souls waiting to die. They are a crew again united in their shared sorrow. You lie on your rough blanket listening, and you feel a strange lump in your throat. You hum along quietly, the melody, a painful, beautiful ache in your chest. It is a moment of connection so profound that it feels almost unbearable. It is a small act of defiance against the overwhelming silence, a reminder that they are still human, that they can still create something beautiful, even in the heart of a nightmare. The song eventually fades away, the last note carried off by the wind, and the silence returns heavier than before. But something has changed. That small flicker of shared humanity, that moment of grace, has not lessened the horror. It has sharpened it. It has reminded you of everything you are losing, of the beauty that still exists in a world you will likely never touch again. The song was a brief, painful reminder that your soul is not yet dead, even if your body is already on its way. His name is Leo. He is a young man from Florence, no older than 20, with a quick smile, and a love for telling stories that were probably not true. He was your friend. You shared watches with him, traded jokes with him, and listened to him talk endlessly about the girl he was going to marry when he returned home. Now he has the plague. He lies in a corner of the deck, shivering, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The other sailors keep their distance, their fear a palpable wall around him. But you can't. You can't leave him to die alone. So you break the unspoken rule. You approach him. You bring him his ration of water, lifting his head gently so he can drink. He barely swallows. His skin is on fire. The black swellings in his neck are large and angry. He doesn't seem to recognize you. His eyes are wide, lost in a fevered delirium. He speaks, but his words are a jumble of Italian and half-formed memories. He talks to his mother. He argues with his brother. He whispers the name of his beloved over and over like a prayer. You sit with him, wiping his brow with a damp rag. You listen. You become the sole keeper of his final thoughts, the only witness to his soul's departure. It is a terrifying and intimate vigil. You are so close to the sickness, to the very breath of it, that you can feel its heat on your own skin. The other sailors watch you from afar, their eyes a mixture of pity and fear. In their minds you are now tainted, marked by your proximity to death. Leo grows calmer as the end approaches. At one point, his eyes clear for a moment, and he looks at you. He seems to see you, truly see you. He tries to smile. "Tell her," he whispers, but he cannot finish. His breath leaves him in a long final sigh, and he is gone. You sit there for a long time, the sound of the waves filling the silence. You have done what no one else would. You have offered a man a small measure of dignity in his final moments, but this act of kindness has cost you. You are now truly an outcast. The other men avoid you completely. You have touched death, and now they are afraid you will bring it to them. You help Henrik wrap the body, the task now so grimly familiar. As you push Leo's body into the sea, you don't feel grief. You feel numb. You have faced the plague up close, held its hand, and somehow you are still here. Your own survival now feels arbitrary, a cruel joke. You are alive for now, but you are more alone than ever. You find a moment of quiet, a rare and precious thing on this ship of ghosts. The sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a beautiful, indifferent spectacle. You find a torn piece of parchment from a discarded shipping manifest and a small nub of charcoal from the cold galley fire. You are going to write a letter. Your hands are clumsy. They are the hands of a sailor, calloused and rough, not made for the delicate art of letters. The ship sways and your charcoal marks are unsteady. But you are determined. You decide to write to your younger sister. You will not tell her about the sickness, the death, the fear. To write of such things would be to make them too real to stain the clean parchment with the horror of this voyage. Instead, you write of other things. You write about the sea, how it changes color, from deep indigo to shimmering silver. You write about the stars at night, how they seem so close you could almost reach out and touch them. You write about the dolphins you saw last month, how they leaped from the waves as if they were made of pure joy. You lie. You tell her you are eating well. You tell her the crew is in good spirits. You tell her you will be home soon, perhaps by the next full moon. Each word is an act of defiance, a rebellion against the despair that surrounds you. This letter is a small, clean space you are carving out of the filth and fear. It is a bridge back to a world you remember, a world of love and normalcy. It is a testament to the person you were before this ship became your tomb. As you write, you know with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that this letter will never be read by anyone but you. It will never reach your sister's hands. It will go down with this ship or be lost with your body to the sea. You are not writing for her. You are writing for yourself. It is your own eulogy, a final declaration that you were once more than just a frightened man on a dying vessel. You were a son, a brother, a man who remembered what it was to love. You finish the letter, the last light of the sun, fading from the sky. You fold the small piece of parchment carefully, your rough fingers gentle for the first time in weeks. You tuck it inside your tunic, placing it over your heart. It is a secret you will carry with you, a silent final connection to a world you will never see again. And in the growing darkness, it feels like the only real thing you have left. With faith in God and talismans now dead and buried at sea, the remaining men turn to an older, more primal form of belief. They begin to search for omens. The world has become an illegible, terrifying text, and they are desperate to find a sign, any sign that might explain their fate. You find yourself doing it too, your gaze constantly scanning the horizon, not for other ships, but for meaning. You watch the flight of a lone seabird that has been following the ship for days. Does its path signal hope or doom? Does it fly towards land or towards an endless watery grave? The men argue about it in hushed, intense tones. One sailor swears it is the soul of a dead commodore guiding you to safety. Another insists it is a demon in disguise leading you to your ruin. The bird, oblivious, simply circles and cries. The sky itself becomes a canvas for your fears. One evening, the sunset is a color you have never seen before, a deep, bruised purple that bleeds into a violent blood-red streak across the horizon. It is beautiful, but it is a terrible beauty. The men gather on deck, staring at it in awed silence. It is a sign of the blood that has been spilt, one man whispers, and the blood that is yet to come. Another, trying to find a flicker of hope, claims it is a promise of a new dawn, that the redness is the fever breaking. But his voice lacks conviction. You all know what a bad omen feels like, and this sky feels like a wound. You start to see patterns in everything, the way the waves crash against the hull, the shape of the clouds, the sudden appearance of a rainbow after a brief shower. A phenomenon that once brought joy now feels like a cruel mockery from the heavens. You are trying to read the language of the universe, but you have forgotten the alphabet. Every sign is open to interpretation, and every interpretation is colored by the suffocating fear that has become the air you breathe. The men are no longer a crew united by a shared purpose. They are a collection of fractured beliefs, each man clinging to his own private superstition. One sailor starts making small offerings to the sea, tossing a piece of his biscuit into the waves, hoping to appease whatever angry god lives in the depths. Another spends his days staring into the water, claiming he can see the faces of the dead looking back at him. You find no comfort in these omens. The sky is empty, the sea is indifferent, and the signs are just reflections of your own terror. You look at the blood-red sunset, and you don't see a message from the gods. You see the color of the fever, the color of the swellings, the color of the slow, inevitable end that is coming for you all. The universe is not speaking to you. It is simply watching. The last vestige of order on the ship was Captain Alessio. He was the authority, the final word, the man who through sheer force of will kept the vessel from descending into total chaos. Now he too is sick. The fever found him in his cabin, and it has taken him with a terrifying speed. The man who once commanded with a voice like thunder now lies in his bunk, delirious and muttering, just another victim of the pestilence. His illness is the final snap in the ship's frayed social fabric. With the captain gone, there is no one in charge. The formal structure of the crew, captain first, mate sailors, deckhands, dissolves into nothing. There is no one to give orders, no one to enforce discipline, no one to steer the ship. The helm is abandoned, the ship's wheel turning idly back and forth with the motion of the waves. The ship is now truly adrift, both literally and metaphorically. A new hierarchy emerges, a brutal one based not on rank or experience, but on pure physical strength. The few sailors who are still strong and healthy, a small, grim band of survivors, take control of the remaining food and water. They are led by a barrel-chested sailor from Genoa, a man who rarely spoke before but now rules through glares and threats. He and his small faction hoard the supplies, doling them out only to those they favor or to those too weak to protest. You must now navigate this new lawless world. You are not strong enough to challenge them, so you make yourself invisible. You stay out of their way. You accept your meager ration of water with a lowered gaze. You watch as they take the larger share, their movements full of a new, ugly arrogance. You see them push a weaker sailor away from the water cask, and no one dares to intervene. The concept of a shared fate is dead. It is every man for himself. You go to the captain's cabin, once peering in from the doorway. He is alone, his body twisted in his sweat-soaked sheets. The man who once held the power of life and death over all of you is now helpless, his authority erased by the fever. He does not even have a man to bring him a cup of water. His power was a costume, and the sickness has stripped it from him, leaving behind only a frail, dying man. The collapse of hierarchy is complete. The ship is no longer a vessel of trade or a piece of a merchant's fleet. It is a small, floating island of anarchy, governed only by the sickness and the brute force of the desperate. You realize that you are not just fighting a plague anymore. You are fighting your fellow man, and you are not sure which is more terrifying. There is a new enemy aboard the ship, one that is becoming more immediate and more terrifying than the plague itself, thirst. The last cask of fresh water is nearly empty. The ale is long gone. What little water remains is at the bottom of the barrel, a foul, slimy liquid that tastes of rot and despair. The ration is now half a cup a day, a few precious drops that are barely enough to wet your tongue. The thirst is a maddening, all-consuming thing. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. Your throat is a raw, dry passage that burns with every breath. The sun, which has been a constant oppressive enemy, now feels even more personal in its cruelty, baking the moisture from your body, leaving you feeling like a dried-out husk. The fear of the plague, which once dominated every thought, is now pushed aside by the immediate primal need for water. You would risk touching a sick man for a single clean drop. The sea, once a symbol of an endless, isolating journey, now becomes a source of exquisite torture. You are surrounded by water, an infinite shimmering expanse of it, and you cannot drink a single drop. You stare at it for hours, the clear, cool blue, a mirage that promises a relief it cannot deliver. You know that drinking the salt water would only bring a faster, more agonizing death, but the temptation is a constant whispering madness at the edge of your thoughts. You see other men staring at it too, their eyes filled with a strange, desperate longing. One afternoon, a fight breaks out near the water cask. Two sailors, both weak with fever and thirst, grapple with each other over the last few dregs. It is a pathetic, clumsy fight, their movements slow and weak, their blows lacking any force. They are like two skeletons wrestling in the dust. The fight ends when one of them simply collapses from exhaustion, his face pressed against the hot wooden deck. The delirium of dehydration begins to set in. Your thoughts become hazy, your vision blurred. You start to see things that aren't there. A cool stream, a rain-filled puddle, a well in a village square. You dream of rain, of rivers, of the feeling of cool water on your face. The dreams are so real that when you wake up, your throat raw and dry, the disappointment is a physical pain. You are floating on a world of water, and yet you are dying of thirst. The plague may or may not take you, but you are beginning to understand that there are many ways to die on this ship, and some are slower and crueler than others. The final irony of this cursed voyage is not that you are surrounded by death, but that you are surrounded by water you cannot drink. In the midst of the thirst and the fever, a strange and profoundly human moment occurs. Henrik, the old sailor, produces a worn, greasy deck of cards from his tunic. The edges are soft and frayed, the faces of the kings and queens faded from years of use. He doesn't say a word. He simply sits down on the deck, using an overturned barrel as a table, and begins to shuffle. One by one, a few of the other survivors join him. You are one of them. There is nothing left to wager, no coins, no food, no promises. The game is not for stakes. It is a ritual, It is a quiet act of defiance against the chaos and attempt to impose a small familiar order on a world that has none. The four of you play in near silence, the only sound the soft slap of the cards on the barrelhead and the gentle wash of the sea. Your hands tremble slightly, not just from weakness, but from the simple effort of holding the cards. You look at the other players. Their faces are thin and drawn, their eyes hollow. One of them, a man named Thomas, has the fever. You can see it in the glassy sheen of his eyes and the slight flush on his cheeks. Yet he plays with a strange, serene focus, as if the game is the only thing tethering him to the world. There is no laughter, no friendly banter. The game is a somber, meditative thing. You play a hand, you lose, you play another. The sun beats down. A man groans in his sleep nearby. But for these few minutes, you are not just dying men on a plague ship. You are card players. You are following rules. You are participating in a shared, structured reality, however fragile it may be. You find yourself focusing on the simple mechanics of the game, the feel of the worn parchment in your hand, the strategy of which card to play next, the quiet satisfaction of taking a trick. It is a relief to have a problem you can solve, a choice you can make in a world where you have no choices left. Thomas the sick man wins a hand. A faint, ghostly smile touches his lips. He doesn't have the strength to gather his winnings, because there are none. The victory is the point. He has won. He has imposed his will on the small, ordered universe of the game. The game ends as quietly as it began. The cards are put away. The men disperse back to their own private islands of suffering. But something has shifted. That small act of normalcy, of playing a simple game in the face of annihilation, was an act of profound courage. It was a declaration that even with death all around you, you could still choose to sit down with your brothers and play one last hand. It was a way of pretending, for just a little while, that you were still alive. The line between the living and the dead has begun to blur. The ship is so empty now, so quiet, that the silence is populated by ghosts. The remaining men have started talking to themselves. But they are not talking to themselves. They are talking to the dead. You see it everywhere. A sailor sits where Pietro used to mend his nets, having a quiet, one-sided conversation, nodding, and sometimes smiling, as if Pietro were right there answering him. You see Henrik, the old sailor, standing by the rail, whispering stories to the sea, addressing his dead shipmates by name, telling them of the changing winds and the position of the stars. It is a coping mechanism, born of an isolation so profound it has begun to warp reality. The crew is so small, the loneliness so vast, that they have repopulated the ship with the specters of their memory. At first, you think they are going mad, but then you find yourself doing it too. While on your watch one night under the cold, distant stars, you find yourself whispering a question to Leo, your young friend from Florence. You ask him if he remembers the story he told you about the girl he was going to marry. And for a moment, you can almost hear his laugh so clear in your mind that you turn expecting to see him there. But there is only empty deck. The grief and the loneliness are so immense that your mind has begun to build bridges back to the ones you have lost. The ship is no longer just a vessel. It is a haunted house, each plank of wood saturated with memory. The ghosts of the dead are more present, more real than the few living men who walk the decks like shadows. The living are silent, withdrawn, lost in their own fear. But the dead are talkative. They are in the wind, in the creaking of the wood, in the corners of your vision. You start to prefer their company. The dead do not cough. They do not have the fever. They do not look at you with suspicious, frightened eyes. They are simply there, a silent, comforting presence in the vast emptiness of the voyage. You find yourself having long conversations in your mind with your father, who died years ago. You ask him for advice. You tell him you are afraid. And in the silence, you imagine his reply. This is the new society of the ship, a handful of dying men and a chorus of ghosts. And you are no longer sure which group you belong to. The living are so close to death, and the dead feel so intensely alive in your memory. Perhaps you think, as you stare out at the dark water, the dead are better company after all. They have already crossed over. They are free from the fear. And in your mind, they are free to sail home with you. Finian, the old Irish sailor who sang the lament and clutched his pouch of soil, is the next to be claimed. But the sickness takes his mind before it takes his body. His delirium is not one of fear or frantic whispers. It is a strange, poetic madness. He no longer sees the plague ship, the dying crew, or the endless hostile sea. He sees something else. He sees the sea of his youth, a mythical ocean from the shores of his homeland. He lies on the deck, his eyes wide and bright with a feverish light, and he speaks of wonders. He points a trembling finger at the waves, and swears he sees the heads of Selkies, the seal folk, of his legends, their dark eyes, watching the ship with sorrow. He talks of Merrows, the mermaids of Irish lore, singing on distant rocks, their voices too faint for you to hear. He whispers that the ship is no longer sailing to Italy, but is on a sacred voyage, following the ghost of St. Brendan to the Blessed Isles, a paradise that lies just beyond the western horizon. His voice is weak, but full of a beautiful, heartbreaking conviction. He describes these islands in vivid detail, the green hills, the air filled with the scent of apple blossoms, the rivers of sweet milk. He is not on a ship of death. He is on a pilgrimage. You and the few other survivors listen to him, and for a moment you are drawn into his vision. His madness is so much more beautiful than your reality. You find yourself looking where he points, half expecting to see the green shores he describes. You want to believe him. You want to believe that this suffering has a divine purpose, that you are not just dying of a random pestilence, but are on a sacred quest. One afternoon, as the sun begins to set, Finian grows calm. He looks out at the horizon, his eyes fixed on something only he can see. A faint smile touches his lips. There it is. He whispers, his voice full of awe. The shore. So green. He raises a hand as if to wave, and then, with a final gentle sigh, he is gone. He dies mid-sentence, his eyes still fixed on his imaginary paradise. You look out at the empty sea, at the endless expanse of water where he saw his blessed isle. There is nothing there, only the setting sun and the darkening waves. A profound sadness washes over you, a grief not just for the man, but for the stories that died with him. His madness was the last piece of magic on this ship, the last flicker of a world that was not just brutal and ugly. And now that too is gone. All that is left is the stark, silent reality of your slow, inevitable end. A new kind of madness takes hold of the ship, one born not of fever, but of pure, desperate superstition. The belief spreads like a contagion that the cargo itself is the source of the plague, that the silks and spices in the hold are not just goods, but cursed objects breathing the pestilence into the air. It starts with one sailor, a man from Crete, his eyes wide with a paranoid fire. He storms into the cargo hold with a hatchet, his movements frantic and full of a terrible purpose. You hear a splintering crash, followed by a shout. He begins breaking open the wooden chests, his hatchet falling with wild, indiscriminate blows. He is not trying to steal, he is trying to cleanse. He grabs bolts of precious silk fabrics that were worth a small fortune and begins heaving them overboard. The vibrant colors, deep blues, rich reds, shimmering golds unfurl in the air for a moment before hitting the dark water and sinking. It's the devil's cloth, he screams, his voice raw. It carries the scent of the demon. At first, the others just watch, stunned. But his madness is infectious. Another man joins him, then another. Soon a small group of the weakest-minded survivors are in a frenzy, a chaotic ritual of purification. They toss sacks of spices into the sea. The air fills with the exotic, almost sickeningly sweet scent of cinnamon cloves and pepper, a strange perfume for a funeral. The scent of wealth and faraway lands now mingles with the stench of death and decay. You watch from the deck, too weak or perhaps too numb to intervene. It is a surreal spectacle. The wealth of a nation, the entire purpose of this long and arduous voyage, is being offered as a sacrifice to the indifferent sea. It is an act of utter hopelessness, a final desperate attempt to appease a force they cannot understand by destroying the only thing of value they have left. They are no longer sailors or merchants. They are primitive men making offerings to an angry god hoping to trade silk for salvation. When it is over, the hold is a wreck of splintered wood and scattered debris. The ship feels lighter, emptier, hollowed out. But the sickness remains. The air is still heavy with it. The sacrifice has changed nothing. The men who threw the cargo overboard now stand on the deck breathing heavily, their eyes still wild. They look out at the sea as if expecting a sign, but the sea is silent. The ship is still cursed, and now they have nothing left to give. You collapse. The thirst, the hunger, the unending fear, it all becomes a dead weight that your body can no longer carry. You lie on the hot, splintery deck, the sun beating down on your face. You close your eyes. It would be so easy to just let go, to drift away into the darkness, to surrender. The thought is almost a comfort. You have fought for so long, and you are so tired. You feel a presence beside you, a shadow falling over your face. You expect a kick or a curse. You expect to be left alone. Instead, you feel a hand, gentle and hesitant, on your shoulder. You open your eyes. It is Henrik, the old sailor, his weathered face a mask of grim determination. He has been a quiet, stoic presence throughout the voyage, a man who kept to himself his grief and fear locked away behind a wall of silence. He does not speak. He simply kneels beside you. In his hand is his own cup containing his daily ration of water. It is a pitiful amount, a few precious drops in the bottom of a wooden cup. It is all he has. It is his key to surviving one more day, and he offers it to you. He lifts the cup to your cracked lips. The water is warm and tastes faintly of rot, but it is the most miraculous thing you have ever felt. It is not enough to quench your thirst, but it is enough to bring you back from the edge. You drink a few small, desperate sips, and the simple act of swallowing feels like a resurrection. You look at him, your eyes trying to convey a gratitude that you do not have the strength to speak. He simply nods, his gaze direct and full of a shared, unspoken understanding. In his eyes, you do not see pity. You see recognition. He is acknowledging your shared fate, your shared suffering. In a world where every man has become an island of fear, his small, selfless act is a shocking, breathtaking bridge. It is a flicker of the humanity you thought had been completely extinguished on this ship. He helps you sit up, his hand steady on your back. The moment passes. He retreats back to his own corner of the ship. But the feeling of the water on your tongue and the weight of his simple, unexpected kindness stays with you. It does not give you hope for survival. That hope is long gone, but it gives you something else, a reason to endure for one more hour, one more day. A reminder that even in hell a man can still choose to be human. A storm finally comes. It arrives from the west, a bruised purple wall of clouds that swallows the horizon. In the early days of the voyage, this would have been a moment of frantic, coordinated action. The captain would have been shouting orders, the men scrambling up the rigging to secure the sails. Everything lashed down the ship, prepared to battle the sea. Now there is only a weary indifference. The wind begins to howl, a low moan that builds into a screeching shriek. The sea, once a gentle swell, rises into monstrous gray waves that crash over the deck. Rain comes down in blinding sheets, cold and relentless. The ship is tossed violently, groaning and shuddering with each impact, as if its very bones are about to break. But the few remaining survivors do nothing. They lie on the deck, where they have collapsed, too weak or too apathetic to move. No one tries to secure the sails. No one lashes down the loose barrels. The ship is left to the mercy of the storm. The fear of drowning, which once haunted every sailor's mind, is now a distant, irrelevant concern. What is the threat of a watery grave compared to the slow, agonizing death that is already inside them? What is the chaos of the storm compared to the chaos in their own blood? You lie there, your body pressed against the wet swaying deck, and you let the storm wash over you. The cold rain feels almost like a cleansing, washing away the sweat, the filth, the feverish heat that has clung to you for weeks. You do not fear the waves that crash over the rail, threatening to pull you into the sea. You are so close to death already that the method of its arrival seems unimportant. The ship survives the night, not through skill, but through sheer dumb luck. It is battered. The mainmast is splintered. One of the sails is torn to ribbons, but it is still afloat. As dawn breaks, the storm passes as quickly as it came. The sea grows calm, the sky a pale, washed-out gray. The survivors are still there, just wetter, colder, and one day closer to the end. The great storm, the kind that sailors tell stories about for generations, has come and gone. And it has changed nothing. The real tempest, the one that truly matters, is still raging inside them, silent and unbroken. The last structures of your world have crumbled. The captain is dead. The cook's bell is silent. The hierarchy is gone. And now time itself begins to unravel. The sun rises and sets, the moon waxes and wanes, but these celestial rhythms have become meaningless. The days have no names. Is it Tuesday? Is it Friday? You do not know. And you do not care. There are no more watches to keep. There are no more meals to mark the hours. Your existence has been reduced to a simple, brutal, and looping cycle: thirst, fear, sleep, dream, and the waking despair that follows. The past has become a half-remembered dream, the future an impossibility. There is only the now, this endless, unchanging, floating moment of suffering. You try for a while to keep track. You scratch a small mark on a wooden plank each morning with a piece of charcoal. 1 mark, 2, 3. But soon you lose count. Or you forget if you've already made a mark for the day. Your mind is a fog of dehydration and grief. The small ordered lines you've made begin to look like meaningless scratches. What is the point of counting days when each one is the same as the last? Eventually you stop. Without the structure of time, your memory begins to fray. You try to conjure the face of your sister, the one you wrote the letter to, but her features are becoming blurry, indistinct. You try to remember the taste of the bread from your village, but all you can recall is the dry, dusty taste of hardtack. The man you were when you boarded this ship feels like a different person, a stranger from another life. You are no longer sailing through time. You are adrift in it. The ship is a timeless purgatory, a space between life and death where the clocks have stopped. You might look at the sun's position in the sky and guess the hour, but the knowledge is useless. What does it matter if it is morning or noon when the suffering is constant? You have lost track of how long you have been at sea. Has it been weeks? Months? It could be a year. It could be an eternity. The world has shrunk to the size of this ship, and its time has been reduced to the rhythm of your own ragged breathing. You are unmoored from everything you once knew, a ghost on a ghost ship, sailing through a sea of endless, undifferentiated moments, waiting for a final shore you are no longer sure you will recognize. The crew is a ghost. There are only a handful of you left now, scattered across the ship like forgotten cargo. Most of the time, you see no one. Each man has retreated into his own small world of suffering, hiding in the shadows, waiting. The watches are no longer kept. There is no one to report to, and nothing to watch for. The sea is empty. The sky is empty. And the ship, this small wooden world, is emptier than both. One afternoon, you find yourself completely alone on the main deck. The sun is a white, hazy disk in the sky. The heat is oppressive. You walk from the bow to the stern, your footsteps echoing with a lonely finality. You pass the abandoned helm, the wheel swaying gently with the ship's motion, a silent testament to the lost control. You look into the galley. The cold, empty pot is a dark mouth that has nothing left to say. You peer down the hatch, into the sleeping quarters, a place you no longer dare to enter, and the smell of death rises to meet you like a foul breath. This is a ship of memories now. You see ghosts everywhere. You see Pietro mending his nets by the rail. You see Leo laughing as he tells one of his impossible stories. You see the captain, his face stern, his eyes on the horizon. They are more real to you now than the few skeletal men who still draw breath. You try to count the dead to say their names aloud to the empty air, but you lose track. The faces begin to blur a long, sorrowful procession of men whose lives ended here on this cursed voyage. The loneliness is a physical weight. It presses down on you heavier than the sun, more vast than the sea. You are a witness to the end of a world, the last man standing in a floating apocalypse. The responsibility of that memory feels too heavy to carry. You are the keeper of their stories, their final moments, their unheard prayers, and when you die, all of it will vanish with you as if it never happened. You walk to the bow and stare out at the water. The ship cuts through the waves, moving forward, always forward, but towards what you are, the last watchman on a ship of the dead, sailing towards a shore that may as well be the afterlife. The silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It is the sound of everything that has been lost, and in that silence you are utterly, terrifyingly alone. The last of the other survivors die not with a struggle, but with a quiet fading. One morning you find Henrik, the old sailor, slumped against the mast, his eyes closed, a look of what might be peace on his weathered face. He is not breathing. The day before, another man simply lay down on the deck and did not get up again. Their passing is so quiet it is almost unnoticeable. The ship's chorus of groans and coughs has dwindled to nothing. Now there is only you. And the silence is absolute. It is a silence that is different from any you have ever known. It is not the peaceful quiet of a calm sea or the reverent hush of a church. It is a dead, hollow silence, the silence of a world without a human heartbeat. The only sounds are the indifferent ones of nature, the creaking of the ship's timbers, the sigh of the wind through the tattered sails, the endless whisper of the waves against the hull. These sounds, once a comforting backdrop, are now a terrifying reminder of your solitude. There is no one to help you bury the last of the dead. You are too weak to lift them, to wrap them in canvas, to push them over the side. So you leave them where they lie. They become part of the ship's landscape, still figures that you learn to walk around. You no longer see them as men. They are objects, part of the grim tableau of this floating tomb. You sit on the deck for hours, listening to the silence. It presses in on you, a physical force. You find yourself holding your breath just to make a sound, to remind yourself that you are still here, that you are still breathing. You try to sing, but your throat is too dry, and the sound that comes out is a broken, pathetic croak that is quickly swallowed by the vast emptiness. This is the final stage of the horror. Not the fever, not the swellings, not the thirst. It is this total soul-crushing isolation. You are the last man alive on a ship full of corpses. You are the only heartbeat left. And as you sit there listening to the silence of the sea and the sky and the dead, you begin to wonder if you are already a ghost too, just one that hasn't yet had the decency to lie down and be still. You have stopped trying to steer. The helm has been abandoned for days, its great wheel now just a piece of forgotten wood, turning slightly this way and that as the currents dictate. The sails torn and frayed from the last storm flap uselessly, in the wind their rhythmic slapping a mocking applause for your failure. The ship is now completely at the mercy of the sea. It drifts. You no longer have the strength or the will to manage it. Your existence has been stripped down to its most basic elements, thirst, breath, and the slow, agonizing passage of the sun across the sky. You lie on the deck, your body too weak to move much, and you watch the world drift by. The ship turns in slow, lazy circles. Sometimes you are facing west, towards a sunset that bleeds across the sky. Sometimes you are facing east, towards a dawn that brings no hope. You have no direction. You have no destination. Control is an illusion you have long since abandoned. You are a passenger on a ghost ship, and its captain is the wind. The days blur into one another, an endless, featureless expanse of time. You watch the clouds drift, their shapes changing, and you feel a strange kinship with them. You are both just floating, moved by forces you cannot see or understand. At one point, a moment of startling clarity cuts through the fog of your dehydration. You remember the cargo. Below your feet in the dark, silent hold lie the remnants of what was once a fortune. Splintered chests, scattered spices, bolts of ruined silk now likely soaked with bilge water. The purpose of this entire voyage, the reason these men left their homes and families now, seems like a distant, absurd joke. A ship full of worthless treasure and a cargo of death drifting aimlessly towards nowhere. You let go. You stop fighting. You stop praying. You stop even hoping. You simply lie there on the deck of your coffin, and you let the ship take you where it will. You close your eyes and surrender to the motion of the waves, the warmth of the sun, the vast, empty indifference of the sea. There is no struggle left in you. You are a piece of driftwood, and so is the ship. Your fate is no longer in your hands. It belongs to the tide, and in that surrender you find a strange, hollow peace. The peace of absolute and final defeat. You are drifting, not just on the sea, but in the hazy space between consciousness and delirium. The lack of water has hollowed out your thoughts, leaving behind a quiet, echoing emptiness. The sun rises and sets, but you barely register its passing. You lie on the deck, your eyes half closed, listening to the gentle slap of the waves, a sound that has become the entire world. In this state, you begin to see things. You see Finian's green isles on the horizon. You see the faces of your dead shipmates in the clouds. You have learned not to trust your eyes. So when you first see it, you dismiss it. It is just a smudge on the edge of the world, a dark thin line where the blue of the sky meets the blue of the sea. It is another trick of the light, another phantom born of your thirst and your grief. You close your eyes expecting it to be gone, when you open them again, just like all the other mirages. But when you open them, it is still there. And it is closer. It is no longer a smudge. It is a shape solid and real. The shape of distant hills of a coastline. It is land. The word itself feels foreign, a relic from another language, another life. You stare at it, your mind struggling to process what you are seeing. You have been lost at sea for so long, surrounded by nothing but water and death, that the sight of solid ground feels impossible, a violation of the rules of your new reality. A strange feeling washes over you, but it is not joy. It is not relief. It is a hollow, trembling shock. Hope is a feeling you have long since forgotten, and your body does not remember how to feel it. You struggle to your feet, your muscles screaming in protest, your body a frail skeletal thing. You grip the rail, your knuckles white, and you stare. It is real. It is not a dream. The ship, guided by some final cruel twist of fate, is drifting towards it, towards a shore, towards people, towards a world that knows nothing of the horror you carry. Your heart begins to pound in your chest, a slow, heavy beat, a drum awakening from a long slumber. You are not sure if it is a beat of hope or a beat of terror. You have been waiting for this moment, for what feels like an eternity. And now that it is here, you are not sure if it is a rescue or a curse. Before you can truly believe your eyes, another sense is awakened, one that confirms the truth more powerfully than sight ever could. A breeze, gentle and warm, drifts across the deck, and it carries a scent. It is a smell you have not experienced in months, a smell you had forgotten could even exist. It is the smell of land. For so long your world has smelled only of salt, of rot, of the stale, sickly sweetness of the plague. But this new scent is alive. It is the smell of damp earth, of green growing things. It is the rich, loamy scent of soil, the sharp, clean fragrance of pine trees, the faint, sweet perfume of unseen flowers. You can even smell the smoke from distant hearths, a human smell, a smell of homes and hot meals. You stand at the rail, and you inhale deeply, greedily. The scent fills your lungs, and it is so overwhelming, so powerfully alive, that it brings tears to your eyes. It is the smell of a world you thought you had lost forever. It is the smell of everything this voyage has stolen from you. Each note in that complex perfume triggers a flood of memories. You remember the smell of the fields in your village after a spring rain. You remember the scent of wood smoke on a cold autumn evening. You remember the smell of your mother's garden. You begin to weep not from sadness, but from the sheer, shocking force of it. Your body trembles, and the tears that run down your gaunt, sun-baked face are a mixture of grief and a strange, painful kind of joy. The smell is proof. This is not a dream. This is not a fevered hallucination. It is real. Land is real. Life is real. The ship continues to drift closer, guided by this invisible current of scent. The smell grows stronger, richer. It is the smell of civilization, of society, of a world that is not haunted by the silence of the dead. You are returning to the world of the living, but you are a messenger from the world of the dead. And the gift you are about to deliver is not one of spices and silk, but of the silent, sweet-smelling horror that has become your only companion. The land smells of life, but you and this ship, you smell of death, and you are almost there. The ship, now a silent, battered derelict, is caught in the coastal current and guided as if by an unseen hand into the bustling harbor of Messina, Sicily. From your position on the deck, you watch the city come into view. It is a kaleidoscope of life. Stone buildings climb the hills, their tiled roofs glowing in the afternoon sun. The docks are crowded with people, merchants shouting, children laughing, sailors unloading cargo from other ships. The air is filled with the sounds of a living city, a soundscape so vibrant and chaotic that it feels alien to your ears, which have grown accustomed to the quiet symphony of death. You look down at yourself, at your own skeletal form, your tattered and filthy rags, and then you look at your ship. The sails are torn and hang like gray, lifeless shrouds. The deck is empty-stained and littered with the debris of a forgotten struggle. You are a ghost on a ghost ship drifting into a world that is teeming with an energy you can no longer comprehend. At first, the people on the shore are curious. They point at your strange, silent vessel. A ship arriving with no crew on deck, its sails in tatters, is an unusual sight. A crowd begins to gather at the edge of the docks, their faces a mixture of curiosity and amusement. But as your ship drifts closer, their curiosity turns to confusion, then to unease. They can see you now, a single, gaunt figure, standing at the bow, your face a mask of sun-baked, hollow-eyed despair. They see the silent deck, the splintered mast, the profound wrongness of it all. A hush begins to fall over the crowd. The laughter dies. The shouting stops. They can sense it. They can feel the cold aura that surrounds your vessel. They know that this ship is not carrying goods. It is carrying a story, and it is not a good one. The hull of your ship bumps gently against the wooden dock. The sound is soft, almost anticlimactic, but it marks the end of your voyage. It is the first time you have touched the world of the living in months. A dock worker, his face a mixture of fear and duty, moves to throw a mooring rope. The crowd is silent, now watching, waiting. They do not know what you are or what horror you have brought with you, but they are about to find out. You are the first messenger of the great mortality, and you have just arrived. The crowd on the dock stands in a stunned, silent tableau. The initial curiosity has evaporated, replaced by a deep instinctual fear. They are no longer looking at a strange ship. They are looking at a tomb. They stare at you, the lone figure on the deck, and you can see their faces clearly now. Fishermen with skin weathered by the sun, wealthy merchants dressed in fine cloth, children clutching their mothers' skirts. And in every pair of eyes you see the same expression, horror. They can smell the ship now. Not the imagined scent of Eastern spices, but the real smell. the faint, sweet, sickly odor of death that clings to the wood, to the sails, to you. They see your gaunt frame, your hollow eyes, the way your filthy rags hang from your skeletal body. You are not a sailor, returning from a prosperous voyage. You are a specter, a thing that has crawled out of a nightmare. A man in official-looking robes, a port authority perhaps, steps forward to the edge of the dock. He cups his hands around his mouth and shouts, his voice trembling slightly. "Who are you? Where is the rest of your crew?" You try to answer, but your throat is a desert. Your voice comes out as a dry, rasping whisper, a sound that is barely human. You manage a single word, a word you have not dared to speak aloud until now. Plague. The word is small, but it travels through the crowd like a shockwave. A woman gasps and pulls her child close. Men take a step back, then another, creating a wide, empty space around the edge of the dock where your ship now rests. Their faces, once filled with life and curiosity, are now masks of terror. They are no longer looking at you. They are looking at the death you have brought with you. In their healthy, vibrant faces, you see everything you have lost. You see the life that was stolen from your shipmates, the community you once belonged to, the simple, beautiful hope of a safe return. Seeing them, the living, is more painful than seeing the dead. You are a mirror, reflecting the horror they cannot yet comprehend. You have rejoined the world of the living, but you are utterly, irrevocably alienated from it. You are no longer one of them. You are an omen. There is a moment of frantic, panicked indecision on the dock. The port officials are arguing, their voices sharp and high. Some are shouting to cut the ship loose, to push it back out to sea, to let it drift away and take its curse with it. Others, bound by the laws of commerce and the sea, insist that the ship must be docked, its cargo inspected, its captain questioned. The fear is at war with procedure. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, two dock workers, their faces pale with a reluctant bravery, step forward. They uncoil a thick, heavy mooring rope. You watch as one of them swings it, the rope arcing through the air, a dark, snaking line against the bright blue sky. It lands on the deck of your ship with a heavy, final thud. It is a lifeline, a physical connection to the shore, to the solid, living world. But as you look at it, lying coiled on the stained planks, it feels more like a chain, a leash, that will bind this ship of death to the heart of the city. You stumble towards it, your legs weak and trembling. It is the last act of seamanship you will ever perform. Your hands, once strong and sure, are now clumsy and weak as you struggle to secure the rope to the cleat. Your fingers can barely grip it. The rope pulls taut. The ship groans as it is drawn tight against the wooden pilings of the dock. The connection is made. The barrier between your world of death and their world of life has been breached. The ship is no longer adrift. It is here. It is a part of their city now. The arguments on the shore grow more frantic. "Push it back!" one man screams. It is a death ship. But it is too late. The rope is tied. The laws of the port, however inadequate for this unprecedented horror, must be followed. The officials know they cannot simply turn away a merchant vessel, no matter what it carries. You look at the taut rope stretching from your silent, dead ship to their bustling, terrified shore. It is a bridge that you have just helped to secure, and you know with a terrible, sinking certainty that it is a bridge over which the plague will soon walk. The officials on the dock, after a long and heated debate, decide that someone must board the ship to assess the situation. But you do not wait. With the last of your strength, you decide you must get off this floating tomb. You stumble towards the gangplank, a simple wooden board that the dock workers have cautiously pushed towards your ship. It wobbles unsteadily as you place your foot on it. Your first step is hesitant. For months your body has been attuned to the constant motion of the sea. Now, as your foot touches the solid, unmoving wood of the dock, the world seems to tilt. The ground does not sway. The stability is so foreign that you almost fall. You grip the railing, your knuckles white, and take another step. You are on land. The crowd parts as you walk, creating a wide, silent corridor. They move away from you as if you are on fire. No one comes close. No one offers a hand. They just stare, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity, pity, and raw fear. You are a creature from another world, a ghost who has walked off a ship of the dead. Your skeletal frame, your hollow eyes, your filthy rags, you are a living omen of the horror that has arrived. You take a few more unsteady steps, and then your legs give out. You collapse onto the stone paving of the dock, the hard, solid ground a shock after so long. You do not have the strength to get up again. You simply lie there looking up at the sky, which now seems impossibly bright. Two city guards approach you, their movements cautious and reluctant. They handle you gingerly, as if you are made of glass or poison. They lift you by your arms, their touch a strange, unwelcome sensation after so long without human contact. They are taking you somewhere you do not know where. This is not the triumphant return you dreamed of. There are no welcoming arms, no joyful reunions. There is only the fear in the eyes of strangers and the vast, lonely space they create around you. You take your first breath of the city's air. It is thick with the smells of life, baking bread, flowers, animals, people, and you know with a crushing finality that you are about to poison it all. You are in a small stone room isolated from the rest of the city, a quarantine. Officials come to question you. They are men in robes, their faces covered with cloth, their questions sharp and impersonal. They want facts. Where did you come from? What port did you last visit? What is in your cargo hold? Who died first? You try to tell them your story, but the words are useless. How can you explain the silence of the rats? How can you describe the hollow feeling of pushing your friend's body into the sea? How can you make them understand the particular madness of dying of thirst while surrounded by water? Your story is a nightmare, and they only want a shipping manifest. You look at their clean hands, their well-fed faces, and you realize they cannot comprehend what is coming. They see you as a survivor, a tragic but isolated case. They see your ship as a problem to be managed. They do not understand that the true horror is not what happened on the ship, but what is about to happen here in their bustling, vibrant city. The sickness did not die with the crew. It traveled with you. It is in your breath. It is on your clothes. It is in the very wood of the ship that is now tied to their dock, and it is in the few rats that must have survived that are even now scurrying down the mooring ropes and disappearing into the alleys of Messina. The gift you brought home was not silk from China or spices from India. It was the great mortality. You are patient zero. You are the spark that will light the fire. You are the sole survivor of a voyage that killed everyone you knew. But your survival is not an ending. It is a beginning. The beginning of their end. Through the small barred window of your room, you can see the city. You see the people walking in the streets, laughing, trading, living their lives completely unaware of the invisible tide that is about to sweep them all away. You survived, but you have brought the end with you, and as you sit there in the quiet of your stone room, you understand the final devastating truth of your journey. The horror did not end when you reached the shore. It has only just begun. When we think of the Black Death, one image often comes to mind, a tall figure in a black cloak and a strange bird-like mask. The plague doctor, a symbol of medieval terror and medicine. But that image, as powerful as it is, does not belong to your story, not to the 14th century. That iconic beak mask was actually an invention of a later time, created centuries later, around the 17th century, mostly in France and Italy. It was believed that the long beak filled with aromatic herbs, like mint and lavender, could purify the bad air, or miasma, which they thought caused the disease. On your ship in 1347, there was no such doctor. There was only Elio, the helpless barber surgeon, with his few dried herbs and an old book. The medicine of your time was not based on germ theory, but on the theory of the four humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Pietro's fever was not seen as a bacterial infection, but as an imbalance of these humors. The cure was not an antibiotic, but bloodletting or a purge to cleanse the body. The image of the plague doctor haunts us because it represents an attempt, however misguided, to confront the unexplainable. But the truth is even more terrifying. During the first wave of the Great Mortality, there was no beak mask to hide behind. There was only helplessness prayer and the raw, naked fear of facing an invisible enemy. Our story began with the silence of the rats, and history often blames them. We know that black rats and the fleas they carried were the primary vectors for the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the cause of the bubonic plague, with its terrifying black swellings. Your ship, like thousands of others, was the perfect vehicle for these rats and their deadly fleas to travel the world. But that is not the whole story. The Black Death had more than one face. When Pietro's cough began, it wasn't just a symptom. It was a weapon. There was another, more terrifying form of the plague, the pneumonic form. This one needed no fleas. It spread directly from person to person through airborne droplets from a cough or a sneeze. In the cramped, damp space below the deck of a ship, a single cough was enough to turn the air into a cloud of death. This is why the plague devastated your ship so quickly and so completely. Even after all the rats were dead, the disease continued its journey, moving from one breath to another. This explains why isolated communities, even places with no rats, were also wiped out. The true horror did not just come from a flea's bite. It came from your fellow man, from the person with whom you shared your last piece of bread. You didn't have to be bitten. You only had to breathe. On your ship, perhaps you blamed a curse, the cargo, or the air. But when the plague swept ashore, human fear needed a more specific face to channel its rage. It needed a scapegoat. And tragically, it found them. Across Europe, Jewish communities were falsely blamed. Vicious rumors spread claiming that Jewish people had poisoned the wells to cause the plague. This hysteria led to horrific massacres. Hundreds of Jewish communities were burned alive, tortured, or expelled. The pain of the plague was compounded by the horror of hatred. But they were not the only victims. Anyone considered different could become a target. Lepers, foreigners, beggars, and especially single women accused of being witches all face suspicion and violence. When you cannot explain why God would send such a catastrophe, it is easier to find someone to blame. It provides a false sense of control in a world that is completely out of control. Fear did not give birth to compassion. It gave birth to cruelty. And in the years of the Black Death, Europe was not only fighting a disease, it was fighting the darkness within its own soul. The real sickness was not just in the blood. It was in the mind. Fear was a virus of its own, spreading faster than the plague itself. It spread from one person's eyes to another's, through whispers, through rumors. On your ship, fear broke down trust, turning brothers into suspicious strangers. And on land, those in power, both secular and religious, realized the strength of fear. The church declared that the plague was God's punishment for the sins of mankind. This was not just a spiritual explanation. It was a tool of control. If the plague was caused by sin, then the only solution was repentance, a return to the church, a stricter adherence to its rules. The church's power was reinforced by the despair of its flock. Kings and lords also used fear to impose order. Curfews, quarantines, and harsh punishments were enacted. Order was maintained not by consensus, but by threat. The fear of the disease became a pretext for tightening control. In that world, you were not only afraid of an invisible germ, you were afraid of your neighbor reporting you, of the guards arresting you, of the priest cursing you. Fear became a prison, and everyone was a prisoner. The story of your ship, of its fear and its collapse, may seem like a nightmare from a distant past. But perhaps it is not as distant as we think. Its echoes are still here. Think of how we react to crises today. When a new illness appears or a disaster strikes what follows, rumors spread on social media like wildfire. So do suspicion and blame. We look for someone, some group, some nation to hold responsible. We look for simple explanations for complex problems. The fear of contagion drives us apart. Trust is eroded. Like the sailors on your ship, we begin to look at each other with suspicious eyes. Discrimination and prejudice rise, aimed at those who are deemed different or unsafe. And just as in the Middle Ages, fear can become a tool. It can be used to divide, to control, to justify the removal of freedoms. The story of the Black Death is not just a history lesson. It is a reminder of the fragility of social order and of how easily fear can turn us into the worst versions of ourselves. The whispers on your ship. They sound a little like the whispers we hear today, during uncertain times. And yet, even on that ghost ship, amidst the hunger, the thirst, and the despair, something else survived. Henrik offered you his last cup of water. Finian sang a sad song for strangers. Even when faced with annihilation in brief, fragile moments, humans still chose kindness. These were not grand, heroic acts that would be written into the history books. They were small, quiet gestures, almost meaningless in the face of the catastrophe's scale. But perhaps these are the actions that matter most. They are proof that even when the world is collapsing, even when God is silent and medicine is helpless, something remains. A flicker of compassion, a connection between two suffering souls. The story of the Black Death is not just a story of darkness. It is also a story of those who tried to keep a candle burning in the storm. Most of those candles were extinguished, but as long as one was still burning, it proved that the light had existed. And perhaps that is all we can ever hope for. Your ship reached the port of Messina in October of 1347. History records that moment as one of the starting points of the Black Death in Europe. From that small Sicilian harbor, the sickness followed the trade routes, spreading like an unquenchable fire. First to Italy, then France, Spain, England, and then to Germany and Russia. In 5 short years, nearly half the population of Europe was wiped away. Cities became silent graveyards. Villages were left empty. The world as you knew it, and the world as they knew it, was changed forever. Powers collapsed, kingdoms faltered, and faith in God was tested to its very core. Your ship did not just bring a disease. It brought an end, and from its ashes a new scarred and frightened world was born. And you? The sole survivor. History does not record your name. You were a ghost who walked off a ghost ship, an unnamed messenger for an unimaginable catastrophe. Perhaps you were quarantined. Perhaps you told your story to officials with horrified faces. But it's likely you did not live for long. Your immunity was depleted. Your body was a battlefield. Or perhaps the very infection you carried finally claimed you. The cruelest irony of all, you survived hell, only to become its messenger, and then vanished into the very storm you had delivered. There is no grave marker, no line in a book, just a forgotten memory of the last sailor. And now, as you lie here in the warmth and safety of your own room, ask yourself one thing. If it were you on that ship, would you have survived? Not just the fever and the swellings, but the fear, the loneliness, the hunger, the thirst. Would you have kept your sanity as the world around you unraveled? Would you have shared your last drop of water, or would you have turned away? There is no right or wrong answer, only a simple truth: you are not there. You do not have to make those choices. Your blanket is warm and has no fleas. The glass of water on your table is clean and safe. The sounds you hear outside are not the screams of the sick, but the distant hum of a sleeping city. You do not have to worry about black swellings or ancient curses. Your safety is a luxury those on that ship could never have imagined. The story is over. That ship made landfall long, long ago. The screams have fallen silent. The fear has faded into history. Those souls have found their own peace. You are no longer on that ship. You no longer hear the waves against a rotten hull. You no longer smell the sickness. You are here, in your room, safe. You no longer feel the sway of the ship, only the firmness of the mattress beneath you. There is no salt spray on your face, only the gentle air from a fan or an open window. You are here, safe, quiet, and breathing. Just breathe. Breathe in and out. Let your body sink deeper into sleep. Good night.